I'm Kaylee, and today I'm reviewing From Plato to Christ, How Platonic Thought Shaped the Christian Faith. I've read other books by this author and really enjoyed them, so I asked the publisher if they would send me some more books, and they very kindly agreed, and they sent me From Plato to Christ, and I really enjoyed it. Make sure that you subscribe and give this video a like if you enjoy a good discussion about Plato. And now that I've finished Plato, the next one I'm going to read is From Aristotle to Christ. So be sure to click that notification bell if you want to see more similar videos in the future. The philosophy of Plato prepared the way for Christianity to be widely accepted in the ancient world. Socrates and Plato had a way of asking the right questions, even if they didn't know the true answers that can be found in the Bible. Their philosophy points the way for a searching soul to find the truth of Christ. There are some spiritual things that are well known to all creation in general revelation, and Plato used that limited knowledge to formulate his own ideas about virtue and spiritual life. His philosophy directly reflects and leads to the specific revelation of truth in the person of Christ. I really loved the writing style in this book. It's scholarly, but it's easy to understand. It's easy to read, even if you know nothing about Greek philosophy. We not only explore the way in which pagan philosophies point to Christ and a creator God, but also how the myths and analogies of the Greek philosophers have shaped literature and all of Western thought. So each chapter gives a synopsis of the basic dialogues of Socrates and Plato and what they taught, and then we can analyze those main themes and symbols and see how they prepared the way for Christianity. There are several chapters detailing how the early Christian leaders used that same dialectic structure of Plato to explain deep spiritual concepts like eternity and grace, sin and sanctification, and our ultimate place in the cosmos. Because Plato had already laid this intellectual foundation, Christians were able to build logical arguments to reveal God's truth and further his kingdom. One of the most famous of Plato's analogies is that of the cave. He says that we are like people stuck in a cave. We can only see the wall in front of us where there are shadows cast by a fire behind us. But if you could get out of the cave, you would see the reflections of the sun in the water, and then finally by degrees, your eyes would be strong enough to actually look into the sky and see the sun. But people who are still stuck in the cave, they think the fire is the sun because they've never seen the real sun. And Plato says this is like a person who is spiritually blind. They're obsessed with the shadow things of the physical world, when the reality of life is the spiritual world outside the cave. The Bible also teaches that the things we see and experience on earth are only imitations of greater and higher heavenly things, which are the originals of reality. Most of Plato is spent discussing the nature of concepts like justice and virtue and trying to define the inner struggle of the soul. The psychomachia is the war of the soul within itself, battling between temperance and passion, and courage and fear, and wisdom and ignorance. And Plato believed that the way to find a healthy balance in the soul was to ascend the rising path of virtue. Every decision we make either nourishes our soul or damages it, leading us up the path to get out of the cave of ignorance and vice, or leading us further into the depths of darkness. Although Plato believed in reincarnation and a lot of weird religious trends of his time, his reasoning and the basic arguments behind his philosophies are sound, even if some of his conclusions are incorrect due to the limited general spiritual knowledge that was available to him. The author of this book chooses to look at Plato's beliefs in reincarnation kind of as allegorical myths, showing the ascent of the virtuous soul on the rising path or the descent of the evil soul into bestiality. Seen as an allegory for sin and grace and even Christian sanctification, that myth can point us to the truths in the Bible and further illustrate that there is an innate knowledge of good and evil, even in the most pagan of beliefs. In another chapter, Augustine says that Christians are the rightful owners of all truth, and that they should not hesitate to defend it and claim it wherever they might find it, even in the writings of pagan religions. So the main four virtues that Plato defines are wisdom, justice, self-control or temperance, and courage. And they must all work in balance within the soul to create a virtuous life. Plato believed that ignorance and pride were the root cause of all evil choices. Although Plato did not have a concept of sin as taught in the Bible, Plato did believe that all human action should be measured against a divine standard, not just guided by a relative human moral code that changes with every era. The last few chapters of this book examine the writings of early Christian fathers and modern Christian apologists to see how their line of reasoning was influenced by Plato. One of my favorite passages in these chapters was from Gregory of Nyssa, or Nyssa or something, but he draws on Plato's analogy of the soul on the rising path, seeking for the spiritual reality outside the cave of physical shadows. He says, hope always draws the soul from the beauty which is seen to what is beyond. The ardent lover of beauty, although receiving what is always visible as an image of what he actually desires, yet longs to be filled with the very stamp of the archetype. This truly is the vision of God. So since God is the source of all goodness and beauty, our souls appreciate and enjoy the goodness and beauty we experience in the world, but always longing to experience it in full in the presence of its origin, God. This idea of seeking for the origin, the ultimate purpose of our lives, is prevalent in Plato's dialogues, and it finds its fruition in seeking and finding the God of the Bible. Another section that I really enjoyed was the examination of how Dante's Divine Comedy was influenced by Plato. I also really love the section about Erasmus and his belief that while pagans and philosophers may achieve some small amount of general wisdom, the Christian is actually held to a higher standard of virtue because of a clearer access to God. But of course, the best chapter was the one about how C.S. Lewis was influenced by Plato and how Plato was instrumental in Lewis's conversion to Christianity. I recognized many of Lewis's famous quotes and apologetic arguments from Mere Christianity and Problem of Pain, which I had never realized before are directly based on the philosophy of Plato and, of course, kind of recycled into the greater truth of the Bible. Lewis talks about the need for a balance within the soul and how our moral choices will be guided by our spiritual perspective, whether we're staring at shadows on a cave wall or whether we're walking in the sunlight. The author says that true morality does not exist in a void, with people committing random acts of kindness one moment and then violence in another, but in relationship to a clear understanding of who we are, why we are here, and what our purpose is. Apart from that knowledge, we have nothing against which to measure our choices. That really impacted me. That one sentence just blew my mind because I think we really see a lot of moral void these days. I saw a video online the other day of a person wearing a shirt that said kindness at the same time they were committing an act of violence with a look of anger and hatred on their face. And the author perfectly describes the state of a moral barren wasteland. The author says for both Lewis and Plato, moral and mental confusion go hand in hand. In Abolition of Man, Lewis talks about Plato's three parts of the soul: the rational part, the passionate part, and the spirit, which controls them both. So the rational is kind of in danger of becoming too cold and emotionless, but the passionate is in danger of becoming lost in its appetites. And the spirit is the seat of the will, the center of the heart, which keeps them both in balance. If the soul is in harmony with itself, then we can ascend the rising path and become a virtuous person. Ultimately, Plato saw many spiritual things with a surpassing clarity, but his vision could only go so far until the full revelation of Christ would come to the world. Still, we can study his philosophy with a greater appreciation because his questions can be a starting point to lead us to the right answers in the Bible. I loved reading From Plato to Christ. I gave it 5 stars. It was just so interesting. It made me think in different ways. It captured my imagination as well as my intellect. And I cannot wait to dive into the next book, From Aristotle to Christ, how Aristotelian thought clarified the Christian faith. So be on the lookout for that video. Probably coming in November is when I'm going to be reading this one. Please leave me a comment and let me know, what is a book that kind of made you think about things in a different way, that made you think about your life or your moral code or your spiritual health in some different way that you just never quite saw it from that perspective before. I would be interested to get some book recommendations for, something similar to this that is something that inspired you. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe, and remember, the right book in the right hands at the right time can change the world.